The X Factor is one of the most divisive albums in the Iron Maiden discography, with some fans considering it to be the weakest one the boys have ever done, and others simply loving the dark and gloomy atmosphere of the Blaze Bayley debut.
How's the album going?
Oh, very well, yeah.
Awesome.
Released on the 2nd of October in 1995, the X Factor became the 10th studio album by the UK heavy metal legends Iron Maiden. So, as a part of our Up the Irons series, let's take a look at some of the interesting facts about it, and then discuss what is the actual problem with the X Factor and why Blaze Bayley has nothing to do with it. Here you go. Guys, super quick, if you want to rock the Up the Pilgrims t-shirt at the upcoming Iron Maiden tour and represent our community, just know that you can still order it via a link in the description to this video. But alright, the ad break is over. Let's do it! On February 22nd of 1993, just a couple of months after a massive Fear of the Dark tour, Bruce Dickinson decided to part ways with Iron Maiden in order to concentrate on his solo career. Back then, still on a more or less positive note. But the problem was that they had actually already booked one more tour, which, because of contractual obligations and the fact that Bruce didn't want to slam the door, leaving the band he'd given more than 10 years of his life to, they all decided they would go on together one last time. And so on March 25th of 1993, Iron Maiden embarked on their The Real Life Tour, which could easily have been labeled the Real Nightmare Tour. For the entire duration of the run, Bruce was getting quite a lot of heat, both from the band members and the fans, who accused him of giving rather unenthusiastic performances. And at some point, Steve Harris was actually so unhappy with him that he remembers he wanted to kill him. Right there on stage! And even more, the biggest problem for the fans was the inconsistency, as many felt like he was giving his all at the bigger shows and completely neglected the smaller ones. And maybe that's why, according to many, Real Life Tour was simply not that good. As Bruce remembered, they walked out on stage and it was like they were in the morgue. The fans knew he was about to leave and that this is the end of an era. And he definitely felt that. And it definitely impacted him as a frontman.
I hope you like all the stuff I'm going to do, and I hope you like all the stuff that these guys are going to do, because they're carrying on.
And that feeling, of course, only proved that Bruce was doing the right thing back then. Thus, on August 28th of 1993, Iron Maiden performed with Bruce Dickinson for one last time. Despite Bruce's departure, Iron Maiden of course did not want to slow down. And so back in February of 1993, Iron Maiden started the search for a new frontman. According to their memoirs, they listened to thousands and thousands of recordings, as just as it was expected, the demo tapes poured in from all over the world, from various vocalists. And there were even some rumors that Iron Maiden could bring Michael Kiske, who recently left German power metal stalwarts Halloween, into the band. As the two bands shared the management, and Michael Kiske was actually quite close with Rod Smallwood, even attending his wedding sometime before it. Yet, of course, Kiske himself denied those rumors, or at least he never seriously considered joining Iron Maiden. And so, roughly a year later, Iron Maiden finally chose their new vocalist. It was Blaze Bayley, a frontman of a rather small Birmingham-based band Wolfsbane, who happened to support Iron Maiden in 1990 during the UK leg of their No Prayer for the Road tour, and was in fact a close friend of the band, whom Steve Harris called at first in spring of 1993, yet it was only in 1994 when Blaze Bayley officially became the new Iron Maiden frontman. By the way, to this very day, Blaze Bayley actually has a rather clear memory of his audition for Iron Maiden, where he was doing the songs like Fear of the Dark, The Trooper, Hallowed Be Thy Name, and Wrathchild, and he was actually rather nervous, despite the whole fact that he was a friend of the band, as the audition process for him felt rather strange. Not unpleasant, just strange. In Wolfsbane, he got used to an absolutely different way of doing things, and Iron Maiden was more like a business-like machine. Less of wasting time and chatting, and much more of playing songs, and trying to do it right, without wasting any tape. And by the way, guys, I actually did a rather extensive episode on how Blaze Bayley joined Iron Maiden and why the band landed on him as their new vocalist. So if you still haven't watched it, definitely check it out right after watching this video. But at the same time, I just wanted to point out that there is actually quite a lot to talk about potential Iron Maiden vocalists whom the band considered back in the 90s. So if you would like me to release a special episode on all the vocalists whom Iron Maiden considered back then, please let me know in the comments. Because you know what? There are actually some rather unexpected names there. You name it! Look! But either way, it was Blaze Bayley who eventually landed the gig with Iron Maiden. And so right after Blaze joined Maiden, they entered the Steve Harris's Barnyard studio in Essex with their new producer Nigel Green to start the work on their 10th studio record. Right after the Fear of the Dark album was released, Iron Maiden lost yet another crucial member of their team. Producer Martin Birch, who worked on all of their albums since Killers, and who sadly decided to retire from music industry back then. And so the work on the X Factor was done under a duo of producers for the very first time in Iron Maiden history. The first co-producer was Nigel Green, and the second one was nobody else but Steve Harris himself, the owner of Barnyard Studios, and the guy who basically runs the band.
Yeah, unbelievable.
But talking about the first, Nigel Green was in no way a newcomer to a top level of musical industry. Before Iron Maiden, he worked with Barón Rojo, Def Leppard, Dio, Testament, and Bruce Dickinson. Yeah, that Bruce Dickinson. And even more, Green actually even worked with Iron Maiden on both Killers and The Number of the Beast. But back then, it was as a recording and mixing engineer. And the X Factor was actually his very first producer gig ever. And that actually brings up the first rather interesting fact about the X Factor. Before this release, Iron Maiden had always worked with producers with a lot of experience. Producers who clearly challenged Iron Maiden. And I'm not saying that Nigel didn't, but still, it was the first time ever when Iron Maiden decided to take full control of the outcome, doing everything exactly in the way they felt they should. Thus making X Factor, if you think about it, possibly the most honest record Iron Maiden had ever released by then. But anyways, it was actually Green who remembered clearly how the name The X Factor came to be. As he recalls, it was right at the beginning of the record sessions. Everyone in the studio felt that with Blaze's singing, the songs, the sound of this new album, it will have that some kind of magic. And when it will come out, it will be Iron Maiden's X Factor, which will play a pivotal role in the band's career. Oh, and in addition to that, it also gave Iron Maiden a cheeky way to sneak in the album's number into its name.
Yep.
And so pretty much right away, it became the working title for the band's 10th studio record, and eventually did make on the album's cover. And in all honesty, in my opinion, it actually perfectly fits a much darker tone of this record. A record which to this very day may be the darkest one in Iron Maiden's catalog, with possibly the most personal lyrics for the band's founder Steve Harris, who back then was right in the midst of a divorce with his first wife Lorraine, with whom he lived together for over 16 years. And as Steve himself later recollected, it was the toughest time he ever faced. And so this title became rather prophetic of how this record would actually turn out, as it was absolutely no surprise that this new Iron Maiden album would get a much darker, much more somber tone, which we all know it for today. But it was not only the sound of the X Factor that portrayed the dark mood of this album. The same went for its artwork as well. The album artwork for the X Factor was created by Hugh Syme, an award-winning Canadian artist who had previously worked with dozens of rock and metal bands like Rush, Virgin Steel, Kick-X, White Riot, Whitesnake, Fates Warning, Magnum, and even artists like Celine Dion. And of course, notably for the first time ever in the Iron Maiden discography, on it, Eddie appeared not as an illustration. It was a diorama in a very lifelike style, with Andy undergoing vivisection, rather vividly. And innocently enough, some fans actually speculated that it was a reflection of how Steve Harris felt during those days. But that of course is just a speculation, as we all know that Eddie did undergo quite a lot of hardships even before that album. But either way, back in the day, that cover was actually considered so gruesome by the label that Iron Maiden were actually forced to release the X Factor with a much safer and much less graphic alternative album artwork, depicting a less graphic view of Eddie from a distance and a reversible sleeve, for retailers to be able to simply flip the record in their stores to not repel the customers. Which, if you think about it, is actually a genius idea.
It seemed like such a simple idea.
But of course, the most notable thing about this album artwork was the fact that it was the last cover until the Book of Souls featuring the classic style Iron Maiden logo. As from Virtual 11 to the Final Frontier, they used a slightly changed logo without the extended lower ends of R, M, and both of N's. Which, I don't know about you, but for some weird reason, I could never accept. If we're being very honest, the public did not really greet the new Iron Maiden album and the new Iron Maiden as warmly as the band hoped they would. And the truth is that many of those were simply not ready for this new, much darker sound of the band, and for Blaze Bayley, a great singer but very different from Bruce Dickinson, who sang all classic songs in a completely different way. And let's not forget that even back then, for many, Bruce Dickinson was the voice of Iron Maiden, the voice without whom they simply could not even imagine this band. And so the truth is that it didn't even matter who would be the band's new vocalist. As for many of those, no one could replace Bruce, no matter how good you are. And at the same time, all of that was taking place in the 1990s, when classical heavy metal was considered to be a dead genre. And so, yes, it wasn't really easy for the band's diehard fans to embrace such changes.
It's a hard knock life for us.
And even the reviewers' opinions were actually rather mixed back then. AllMusic's Stephen Thomas Erlewine wrote that the X Factor lacked powerful riffs and tightly written songs, and according to him, the band simply sounded uninspired with a noticeable lack of energy. And Mike Stagno of Sputnik Music mentioned the lack of heaviness and disappearing metallic feel in the guitar parts, but at the same time, interestingly enough, praised Iron Maiden's choice of Blaze Bayley as their new vocalist, and specifically his performance on the band's 10th studio record.
So we'll all go completely crazy.
But the most interesting thing is that a couple of weeks ago, Steve Harris actually himself pointed out that the X Factor is one of those albums that, although many of the fans did not really understand at first, still, according to him, it would eventually become one of the most beloved albums for the future generations of Iron Maiden fans. And the truth is that I simply cannot really disagree with him. As here's the thing, and I know that this is simply my opinion, but at least to me, the X Factor is actually one of my absolute favorite Iron Maiden albums. And to this very day, I actually consider it to be one of the most cohesive ones this band has ever done in their entire career. And yes, I do understand that I was actually introduced to Iron Maiden with Fear of the Dark, so the X Factor became the first Iron Maiden album that I actually bought myself, and that feeling is something no one can take away from me, and that's exactly why it takes a very special place in my heart. But even if we put that aside, I think many will agree that the X Factor is actually a very consistent record, and it is actually one of the very first Iron Maiden records that withstands exactly the same tone and feel throughout all the songs on it. And so yes, despite the whole fact that many Iron Maiden fans did not really understand the X Factor back in 1995, and in all honesty, I do see why. Still, I can't really disagree with Steve Harris. And the whole fact that the X Factor is actually in the top 10 of the most performed live Iron Maiden records, and the whole fact that every song from it is usually met very warmly by all the die-hard Iron Maiden fans when played live, it actually looks like many more Iron Maiden fans might agree with both Steve and myself. And yet, the X Factor was actually quite different from everything that came before it. And it was a problem for many of the fans. It was the first album with the band's new vocalist, who replaced the legendary Bruce Dickinson. And not everyone was happy about that. It was the album recorded during a very difficult time for Iron Maiden and Steve Harris, and thus turned out to be possibly the most personal, the most dark, the most somber album by then that did not really resemble the classic Iron Maiden sound. But at the same time, that's exactly why, to this very day, it might actually be the most honest Iron Maiden record. It was the album which was the first sign of what Iron Maiden will become less than 10 years later. Being over 70 minutes long, whether you liked it or not, it paved the way for the latter lengthy atmospheric albums like Brave New World, Dance of Death, and the others, and laid the foundation of Iron Maiden of today. And I actually believe that without this record, there is a very, very high chance that Iron Maiden would simply never survive until today. As although for many fans it does have its flaws, still, it was the album. It showed that Iron Maiden is much more than just a collection of people. It is an institution, and it will go on no matter what. But anyways, what do you guys personally think about the X Factor, and which is your personal favorite song from it? Please let us know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and we will prevail. Slava Ukraini!